The room's applause for the maid of honor's toast had just faded. She'd delivered a long, wine-soaked speech about how Isabella was a monument to self-reinvention, a phrase that sounded profound but meant absolutely nothing. I was standing near the French doors, a flute of champagne in my hand, watching a server clear away untouched shrimp skewers. The air was thick with the scent of roses and a desperate need to impress. Then, the silence fell, a deliberate, rehearsed pause. Isabella tapped her fork against her glass. "I have a little surprise," she announced, her smile just a fraction too wide. Her friends, a gaggle of women in rented designer gowns who had earlier called me distinguished with thinly veiled pity, gathered in a loose arc around her. One whispered something, and they all erupted in giggles, transforming the elegant reception into a high school sleepover. She glided toward me in her ivory sheath dress, the train artfully arranged to showcase the custom heels I had paid for. I saw the paper in her hand before she even reached me, a folded white sheet with a glittered edge, like a cursed artifact from a craft store. She held it out. "Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "These are my rules now. If you want this to work, you'll agree to them." Another ripple of laughter from her audience. One of them even let out a mocking wolf whistle. My jaw remained loose. I didn't even blink. I simply reached out, took the paper, and slowly unfolded it. There were 12 bullet points, typed in a severe, bold font, double-spaced like a business proposal drafted by a tyrant with a subscription to a pop psychology blog. No negative comments on her personal growth purchases, which I knew meant the $900 skincare regimen, weekly solo nights to reclaim her independence. No emotional repercussions for skipping my family functions. Mandatory monthly couples counseling. A shared password vault, but only for my devices. Full financial transparency, again, exclusively for me. Respect for her privacy, which I had learned was code for not asking about her work trips to Miami. The rest were even more demeaning. The final point, in a font larger than the others, read, "Sign below to acknowledge your agreement to these expectations and your commitment to our equal partnership." Equal, that was a good one. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence stretch and thicken. Her friends watched me like a Roman audience waiting for the lion to pounce. Isabella tilted her head, a smug look on her face as if she had just handed down commandments from a mountain. I smiled, pulled a pen from my inner jacket pocket, not the cheap hotel pen on the table, but my own, and clicked it once. I leaned forward slightly, scribbled a signature, and pressed the paper back into her hand. I said nothing. No dramatic outburst, no grand speech. I simply turned, placed my champagne glass on the marble buffet, and walked out the side gate of the house I had purchased in full with my own money. I could hear their laughter trailing behind me. One of her friends shouted, "Oh, come on. He's not really mad. He's just old-fashioned." Another added, "He probably doesn't even understand what he just signed." Oh, but I did. Because that morning, tucked neatly inside my suit, was a different document. It had the same glittered edge, the same heavy paper stock, the same precise fold, but the contents were something else entirely, meticulously notarized, witnessed, and legally ironclad. It was a durable financial power of attorney, signed by me, granting myself complete and unilateral authority over the entire marital estate, an estate she had insisted we create together just weeks prior, to keep everything fair. It encompassed our bank accounts, the house, and any future joint assets. The moment we exchanged vows, those assets became co-owned, and the moment she handed me that piece of paper in front of her cackling friends, she gave me the perfect, publicly documented occasion to assert control, not just publicly, but irrevocably. As I walked to my car, the garden lights I'd paid to have installed flickering along the stone path, I felt a profound sense of stillness. Not victory, not anger, just a quiet finality. Inside, Isabella was clutching her glittery list like a trophy, laughing with her friends about her progressive, modern woman power move. But outside, under the quiet stars, a very different kind of signature had just been sealed. The party was already over. It was precisely 8:43 a.m. when her phone rang. Isabella was still in bed, wrapped in her monogrammed silk robe, scrolling through glowing Instagram stories about the wedding. Her followers were eating it up. Modern goddess, one comment read, "You're setting the standard for all of us." The video of her handing me that paper had already amassed nearly 2,000 likes. She was already tagging fashion brands in her posts, shifting seamlessly into influencer mode. She didn't check the caller ID, just answered with a lazy, self-satisfied sigh. "Hello, Isabella." It was Marcus, her attorney. His voice was strained, like someone had slammed the brakes on his morning coffee routine. "Yeah," she said, distracted, flipping through a new filter. "Can we talk later? I have a facial scheduled in an hour." "Isabella," he cut in. There was a beat of silence. "What, exactly, did Arthur sign at the reception?" Her focus sharpened. "Oh, you mean my list?" She chuckled, a playful edge to her voice. "It was just a set of expectations, a modern relationship framework. You know, emotional boundaries, guidelines for keeping our partnership balanced." She was reaching for her bedside coffee. "Why?" "Silence." "Marcus," she prompted. "Are you there?" His breath came through the phone in a sharp exhale. "Isabella, that's not what he signed." He switched the papers. She blinked. "What?" "I'm looking at a notarized power of attorney." "Isabella," he filed it with the clerk's office the morning after the wedding. "I just received a notification from the estate council. They're confused because the file now shows dual ownership of all marital assets, with an active and executed POA on record." For a long moment, the only sound was the faint buzz of the connection. "No," she said, her voice suddenly thin. "That's impossible. He signed my list. I watched him. He signed it right in front of me." "He handed you a signed piece of paper," her lawyer stated flatly. "You didn't verify it was yours. You didn't keep a copy, and you presented him with a document outlining explicit financial expectations in front of 24 witnesses and at least 4 recording cameras." Isabella sat bolt upright. "Marcus, what exactly does this document say?" "It's a durable financial power of attorney. The language is standard, but the structuring is unusually aggressive. It grants him complete management authority over all jointly held assets. He has the full right to file liens, transfer titles, and move funds. And it's retroactive to the date of marriage. That means, Isabel, that means as of your wedding day, he can act on behalf of the entire marital estate." Her mind reeled, jumping to the joint bank account, the house, the Tesla leased under both their names. Her phone started to tremble in her hand. "No," she repeated. "That's not legally binding. He tricked me. That's fraud." "It's not fraud," Marcus said wearily. "It's legally sound. It's notarized, witnessed, and filed. Your rule sheet wasn't even a legal document. You presented it for show." He presented his for the court. Isabella stood up so quickly she knocked over her coffee, a dark stain instantly blooming on her white silk robe. "This is insane. He can't do this," she said, starting to pace. "It's my house." "No, Isabella," he said, his voice dropping. "It's his house. And now he has legal management over your share of it, too, which means you can't refinance, you can't sell, and you can't borrow against it without his signature. And he doesn't need your consent to place a lien on it." She let out a short, brittle laugh. "Okay, well, fix it. That's what I pay you for. Undo it." Marcus sighed heavily. He already filed the lien paperwork. "It's real, and it's been recorded. I can't undo something that was clearly planned with legal counsel by a man who came prepared." He didn't react to your stunt, Isabella. He anticipated it. For the first time in days, her mouth went dry. The social media praise, the congratulatory texts, the memory of clinking glasses, it all felt like the soundtrack to a dangerously naive fantasy. She wasn't the one setting the standard anymore. She was just an actress in a script he had written months ago. "I don't understand," she whispered. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "You might want to find the paper he actually gave you, because if that power of attorney is what I think it is, you've already lost the game before it even began." He paused. And knowing Arthur, I'd start assuming there's more to come. She ended the call without another word. Isabella slammed the leather document folder onto her vanity so hard that the zipper burst open. The silver clasp, engraved with her new initials, ISC, clattered against the glass top like a gavel. She didn't even notice. Her fingers were already tearing through the papers inside, each one a neatly labeled relic of the life she thought she was masterminding. Venue receipts, florist invoices, the prenup she had barely glanced at, printouts of vendor emails, even a glossy, calligraphed copy of her vows. But there was no rules page, no glitter, no signature. She checked again, this time more slowly, her fingertips trembling. Still nothing. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, not with fear, but with a sharp, biting confusion. She pulled every single page out, letting them flutter to the floor in a cascade of contracts and ego. There, at the bottom, wedged beneath a folded seating chart, was something that didn't belong. A cocktail napkin, white, slightly wrinkled, with her own handwriting scrawled on it. Rough draft rules for a healthy marriage. 1. Boundaries. 2. Transparency. 3. Emotional safety. The ink was slightly blurred in places, a faint ghost of condensation. Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't written this at home. She remembered now, scribbling it during her bachelorette dinner, half drunk on champagne and self-admiration. Her friend Jess had said, "You should totally make him sign it at the wedding. For real. Let him know the Isabella era has arrived." They had all cheered, treating a childish power play like a bold feminist statement. She had meant to transfer the list to proper stationery later. She thought she had, hadn't she? Isabella ran to her desk and yanked open the drawer where she kept her specialty paper, the glitter-trimmed sheets she'd bought from a boutique shop in Napa. Half the stack was still there. The top sheet had faint markings from the printer, a partial heading, Isabella's non-negotiables. She froze. She never printed the final list. In her haste and arrogance, she had grabbed the wrong sheet. She hadn't handed him her rules. She had handed him a blank piece of paper. Somewhere between the champagne toasts and the flashing cameras, she had passed Arthur a pristine, unprinted sheet. No text, just sparkles and empty space. And he had smiled, signed it, and handed it back like a perfect gentleman. She had mistaken his strategy for submission. "Oh my God," she whispered, pressing her fingers to her temples, trying to quiet the rising static in her mind. Across town, in a sterile government office, the county clerk had already filed the real document. The legal one. The one that actually existed. It bore Arthur's signature, properly witnessed and notarized, time-stamped at 9:07 a.m. the morning after their wedding. The file was already scanned, uploaded, and permanently linked to their marital estate. There were no errors, no loopholes, no way out. Isabella opened her laptop and pulled up the clerk's public records website. Her fingers fumbled the address 3 times before she got it right. She searched the property by its parcel number. Arthur had insisted they memorize it for tax purposes. She had rolled her eyes at the time. Now, she typed it from memory, and there it was. Lien notice filed. Party of interest, Arthur S. Caldwell POA. The acronym stared back at her from the screen like an accusation. POA. She clicked on it. Legal authority to manage, encumber, transfer, or otherwise control all co-titled assets within the marital estate. Retroactive clause confirmed by joint declaration under marital trust. Authorization logged. Witnessed. Recorded. Isabella didn't realize she was holding her breath until her vision started to swim. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, still clutching the cocktail napkin. The napkin. Her entire performance, her grand moment of power, had been based on a drunken scrawl on a napkin. And while she had been smiling for the cameras, imagining herself a queen, Arthur had been quietly switching out the props on her stage. He hadn't taken the bait. He was the bait. Isabella looked up, her gaze sweeping across the room. The decor she had chosen, the art she had hung, the marble-topped dresser she had made him replace twice because the veining was too aggressive. All of it, paid for by him, in his name, and now, legally, under his complete control. The napkin crumpled in her fist. She didn't cry. Not yet. but she finally understood that the house she was standing in might have been decorated by her, styled by her, and posted online by her, but every single square inch of it now belonged to the man she had tried to humiliate. At exactly 5:12 p.m., while Isabella was on her second glass of Chardonnay, lounging on the white leather sectional she had insisted was statement furniture, her phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line was bland: "Notice of recorded instrument. County Clerk's Office." She tapped it open with one finger, expecting a routine copy of the marriage license or a tax document. Instead, she was greeted by a scanned PDF. It was cold, mechanical, and brutally official. Lead-in notification. Real property encumbrance. Filing party, Arthur S. Caldwell. Instrument, priority lien, POA authority. Amount, $827,000. Asset description, Lot 22, Parcel 491B. Residential property, 7148 Ormond Lane. Her wine glass didn't fall. It just slowly tilted as the blood drained from her hands. She stared at the number, $827,000. It was the exact amount he had spent on the home, the purchase price, closing costs, renovations, the solar panel installation, even the damned koi pond she had called tacky when he added it. The legal description covered every square inch. Frozen, encumbered. She scrolled through the document, her eyes scanning faster, her breath growing shallow. The lien was airtight, executed under his power of attorney, activated the moment they said their vows. It was retroactive to their wedding day. No grace period, no expiration clause. At the bottom, a note in tiny print read, "Lien established in recognition of full principal investment by co-owner Arthur S. Caldwell. No transfer, refinance, or resale may proceed without secured parties' express written consent." Her throat felt tight. She hit redial on Marcus's number. It rang twice. "Isabella." His voice was heavy with exhaustion. "You said he filed a POA," she snapped. "You didn't say he put a lien on the house." "I just found out myself," he replied. "It went through about an hour ago. The county clerk flagged it because of the marital trust." "Isabella, that lien is ironclad." "But he can't turn himself into a bank," she hissed. "No," Marcus corrected her. "He didn't turn himself into a bank. He turned himself into a creditor." She stopped pacing. "What? You've heard of secured debt, right?" he asked. "People place liens on property when they are owed money. This isn't just petty revenge, Isabella. He's legally asserting that his investment in this house was not a gift. It was a secured loan. And now, in the eyes of the law, that's exactly what it is." Isabella stared at the abstract painting on the wall opposite her, the one she'd bought to impress her mother's friends. It suddenly looked like a blurry, indistinct warning. "You can't move a single dime now," Marcus continued. "Not from the house. Not from the equity. You can't refinance without his approval. You can't take out a second mortgage. You can't even sell unless he agrees. And if you do manage to sell, he gets paid first, down to the last penny. That lien is in the first position." Her knees felt weak, and she steadied herself against the arm of the sofa. "You said it was a joint asset," she whispered. "It's community property. He can't block me." "He didn't block you as a spouse," Marcus explained patiently. "He joined you as a creditor. He used your own estate structure against you. He's not denying your ownership. He's just ensuring that your ownership can't be liquidated without paying his claim first." Isabella wanted to scream. Instead, she stared blankly ahead, her mind racing. Could she contest it? Claim coercion? Say she didn't understand? But her rules stunt had been so public. There were dozens of witnesses. There was video evidence. "I need to fix this," she muttered. "Tell me what I can do." Marcus paused again, that same dreadful silence from their earlier call. "Isabella, I can't remove it. The county has already recorded it. The lien is live, and as long as that POA stands, and it will stand, you're trapped." Her eyes flicked towards the hallway, towards her home office where she kept the beautiful real estate flyers she'd had mocked up. She had been planning to leverage the house for her next chapter, sell it at the peak of the market, take her share, and launch her new life. A condo in Santa Monica, a yoga retreat in Bali, maybe a new startup to brand herself as a visionary. Now, all those dreams were just ink on a hostage contract. Isabella stood there for a long time, the wine sweating on the side table, the hum of the air conditioner a low drone against the frantic buzzing in her head. He hadn't just outsmarted her, he had outmaneuvered her. She thought she was marrying a safety net, a stable man with a quiet demeanor and a healthy bank account. Instead, she had tethered herself to a man who had made himself immovable. And now, every wall in her dream house whispered the same word back at her: collateral. Isabella ignored the first two calls from her parents. She was too busy pacing the kitchen, phone in one hand, a half-burnt candle in the other, trying to recall why she ever believed rosewood and bergamot could soothe the mind. The house was eerily quiet, punctuated only by the ding of group text messages she was ignoring. Messages from friends who had gushed over the wedding now sent cautious probes. "Hey girl, you good?" And saw something weird online about the house. "LMK if you need to talk." She finally answered on the third call. Her mother dispensed with hellos. "Isabella," she snapped. "What in the world is going on with this Leon?" Isabella bit the inside of her cheek. "It's nothing, just a paperwork issue. Arthur he's just being spiteful." "Spiteful?" her mother hissed. "You stood up in the house he bought for you and told a room full of our friends and family that he would live by your rules. You made him look like some incompetent fool who needed your supervision." Isabella sank onto a stool at the kitchen island, her knuckles white as she gripped the cold granite. Her father came on the line next, his voice sharp. "Do you have any idea what you handed him?" "I didn't hand him anything," she retorted. "Yes, you did," he shouted. "You gave him that ridiculous list as if it were a legally binding contract you drafted on a napkin. You did it in front of witnesses. Do you understand how that looks to a judge? It looks like you tried to publicly impose a control structure over the marital estate, and he responded by filing a legitimate power of attorney." Isabella swallowed hard. It wasn't a real contract. It was symbolic. Symbolic doesn't matter when you give a man the perfect excuse to treat you like a hostile party. He roared. "You walked him straight into the perfect setup. You made him look like the calm, rational victim. And now he has positioned himself as a secured creditor on your most valuable asset, the very house we told your Aunt Mary you had finally secured." Isabella flinched. Her parents had paraded her marriage around like a corporate acquisition. She had finally landed the house they'd boasted. And with a true gentleman, someone who doesn't make a fuss. Now, the whispers were different. Apparently, Aunt Mary had already heard. So had Uncle Dennis. A cousin texted her a link to a public records website with nothing but a wide-eyed emoji. She pinched the bridge of her nose. "I didn't know he was going to do that. I had no idea." "That's precisely the problem," her father cut in. "You underestimated him. You thought you were managing a simple man who needed your guidance. But he came prepared, Isabella. He knew you'd try something like this." "I didn't try anything," she hissed. "You performed a power play in a house you don't even own, free and clear. Do you know how that looks?" He snapped. "It looks like you married him for the property and then immediately tried to assume control. And now that the legal documents are public, it looks like he successfully defended himself." She didn't have a response. Arthur flipped the narrative. He continued, his voice lowering but losing none of its edge. "You didn't humiliate him. You validated him. You made your intentions look like a blatant money grab, and he legally positioned himself to protect what was his." Isabella leaned forward, staring at a greasy fingerprint smudge on the stainless steel wine fridge. She felt small and cornered, the kind of trapped that money couldn't fix. Her father's voice sharpened again. "You embarrassed this family." The words landed with surprising force. Her family was obsessed with image. Portfolio smiles, matching holiday sweaters, donations to galas where their names were prominently displayed. Her mother once returned an engraved serving platter because the font was too modern. And now their golden daughter, who married the older man with the paid-off house, was the punchline of a story spreading through their social circles like a virus. Whispers of a wedding reception that turned into a legal maneuver, of a bride who lost control before the ink on her vows was even dry. Her father said one last thing before hanging up. You handed him proof that you intended to dominate him, and he used that moment to make himself untouchable. You're not just embarrassed, Isabella. You're outplayed. The line went dead. Isabella sat alone in a house she could no longer leverage, surrounded by walls that seemed to echo every single word. The first sign was a red declined notification at the nail salon. Isabella was mid-debate over almond versus stiletto tips when the receptionist quietly tapped her shoulder. Sorry, ma'am, your card didn't go through. Isabella blinked. Run it again, she said coolly, not looking up from her phone. The receptionist smiled, tapped a few more keys. Still nothing. Would you like to try a different card? The saccharine sweetness in her voice made Isabella's teeth ache. Isabella pulled out her backup card. Platinum, not black, but still respectable. Declined. Are you sure your machines are working? She asked sharply, feeling the weight of other customers' eyes on her. Yes, ma'am, the girl said apologetically. It says insufficient funds. Isabella gathered her things, mumbled something about calling the bank, and stormed out with half-painted nails and a fury simmering beneath her skin. It only got worse. The joint checking account was empty. The emergency savings account she had insisted they open was drained to zero. Even the Just For You travel fund Arthur had started for her last Christmas, a gesture she privately mocked because it came with a leather passport holder instead of actual plane tickets, was gone. She called the bank. Mrs. Caldwell, the representative said, her tone meticulously neutral. The account transfers were performed by Mr. Caldwell using the authority granted in your joint trust agreement and his registered power of attorney. All activity is within the scope of his legal rights. Isabella's jaw clenched. He's liquidating our assets. He's reassigning marital funds into restricted accounts under trustee control, the woman clarified. It's not liquidation, it's reclassification. And since you granted mutual authority under the POA, I didn't grant him anything. Isabella snapped. You did, Mrs. Caldwell, on the day of your marriage. Click. She hung up before she said something that would get her flagged. Her next call was to the car dealership. She drove a pearl-white luxury SUV that she told everyone was technically hers, though it was financed with Arthur's name as the guarantor. When she pulled into her driveway that evening, a flatbed tow truck was already parked at the curb. A man in a grease-stained uniform met her at the door holding a clipboard. Mrs. Caldwell, what is this? She demanded. He gestured to the clipboard. We received a collateral recall request. Your lease was secured by assets that are now under a lien. The bank has issued a withdrawal of the vehicle. You can't take my car. He didn't argue. He just held out the clipboard. When she refused to sign, he simply walked to the vehicle and began the repossession process anyway. Neighbors watched from their windows. She stood there, arms folded tightly, her heels sinking into the perfectly manicured lawn as her car was loaded onto the truck and driven away. It felt symbolic, as if her life had been grabbed by the bumper and unceremoniously hauled off stage. Back inside, she dialed Arthur's number. Voicemail. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. She sent a text. You're acting like a child. This isn't how adults solve problems. No response. Another text. You've made your point. I hope you feel proud of yourself. Nothing. She went to the smart fridge and pulled out a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. As she poured, she noticed the stack of bills on the counter. The water bill, the internet bill, the lawn service invoice. She usually ignored them. Arthur just handled it. Now, each envelope felt impossibly heavy. Then, a notification lit up her phone. Her credit monitoring app was having a meltdown. Change to account status. Available credit reduced. Change to account status. Suspicious activity flag removed. Power of attorney verified. New account note. Transaction authority transferred. She reread that last one 3 times. Arthur hadn't just moved their money. He had systematically detached his name from all liabilities while wrapping himself in the armor of their assets. Isabella's financial footprint had been reduced to a faint outline. Her spending power had collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane, and every attempt she made to claw it back only confirmed what her lawyer had already told her. He had played it perfectly. It was cold, silent, and entirely legal. She opened her banking app one more time and stared at the string of zeros. Then she screamed. Not a dramatic, movie scream. It was a guttural, clipped, helpless sound, the kind you make when you finally realize the walls aren't just closing in, they've already sealed you inside. Isabella always preached that perception was currency. It was her personal mantra, a line she repeated to clients, interns, and anyone who would listen. Image builds trust. Trust builds momentum. Momentum builds money. Her consulting business wasn't a large firm, but it was meticulously curated, like a luxury brand. Her website was polished, her office smelled of eucalyptus and bespoke leather, and her business cards were printed on paper so thick it whispered, "You can't afford to ignore me." But an image is a fragile thing. The first crack appeared as a Google alert she never anticipated. Isabella Caldwell, Leon filed on property, Ormond Lane. She stared at the notification, thinking it had to be a mistake. She even let out a short, sharp laugh, as if mocking the idea could bend reality to her will. Then came the email from a cornerstone client, a private equity firm that had verbally committed to a 6-month retainer. The subject line read, "Quick clarification. Hi Isabella, saw something odd on the property registry during our routine due diligence. Wanted to check in. Is everything okay on your end? Happy to chat." She didn't reply immediately. She drafted a dozen frantic responses, deleted them all, and finally sent back a single, terse sentence. "Thanks for flagging. Just a clerical error. Should be cleared up soon." The reply came an hour later. "Appreciate the update. Unfortunately, we're pausing all new advisory engagements until further notice. Wishing you the best." She stared at the screen, feeling personally insulted. He was gone. Just like that, another email landed in her inbox. This one was from a tech startup she had been advising for 2 years. "Hey Isabella, saw the Leon notice. We're going in a different direction. Thanks for your time." Then came a text from a contact she barely knew. "If you can't even control your own house, how can you advise us on asset growth?" No signature, just the stinging question. The most painful part wasn't the loss of income. It was the loss of leverage, the slow, public erosion of her identity. Clients who once requested her by name began redirecting inquiries to her junior associates. People who used to flood her social media posts with fire emojis now scrolled past in silence. Her speaking engagement at a local investment roundtable was quietly cancelled. Rescheduled, the organizer claimed, but the new flyer went out anyway, her name conspicuously absent. Even her assistant became more cautious, asking less frequently if Isabella wanted to be CC'd on client updates. They could all smell it. People in that world always could. She opened her company's website and refreshed the contact form. It was usually a steady stream of inquiries. Today, it was empty. The site's traffic was down 38% week over week. New inquiries were down 61%. Her brand was hemorrhaging. And the worst part was that the wound hadn't been inflicted by a public scandal, no affair, no lawsuit, no viral meltdown. It came from a single, quiet line on a public property record. A lien. Legal, impersonal, and devastating. That house, her supposed trophy, her favorite talking point, her Instagram backdrop, was no longer proof of her success. It was a symbol of her failure, and now, anyone with an internet connection could see the truth in seconds. She texted Marcus, "Can I undo the POA?" He replied bluntly, "Only if he agrees." Which he won't. Isabella stared at her phone, feeling every inch of her carefully constructed business persona peel away like cheap veneer. Her empire hadn't been conquered by force. It had been dismantled by implication, the kind of quiet collapse that doesn't make headlines, just leaves behind a trail of silence, absence, and the growing sense that everyone is already backing away from the fire. The knock on the door wasn't loud. It was the tired knock of someone who already knows the answer to the question they are about to ask. Isabella ignored it at first. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, staring at an empty vase where fresh peonies used to be. Her weekly flower subscription had been cancelled due to a billing issue. She hadn't bothered to fix it. The knock came again, a bit firmer. She stood, pulled the robe tighter around herself, and opened the door. It was Marcus, her lawyer. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair looked tired. "I brought coffee," he said, holding up a cardboard tray. "Didn't know if you were still speaking to me." She stepped aside without a word and let him in. Marcus walked into the kitchen like a man delivering bad news to a widow. He set the tray on the counter, his eyes scanning the unopened mail, and sighed. "I've spent the last 3 days combing through every inch of that document," he began. Isabella didn't sit. She just folded her arms and waited for the verdict. "I can't undo it," he said finally. "I wish I had better news, but I don't." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. "He placed a priority lien," Marcus continued, almost apologetically. "That's the legal equivalent of saying, 'Pay me before anyone else gets a single dime.' And because it was filed with the authority of a notarized POA, and because he paused, you handed him a document in front of witnesses that implied you wanted financial control, there's not a judge in this state who will see it as coercion." Isabella swallowed. "But it wasn't his document." "It doesn't matter. You initiated a public demonstration of marital terms." He responded with a formal, legal one. "You created the theater, Isabella. He just made it legally binding." She finally sank into a chair. "I thought I was setting expectations," she murmured. "You gave him the perfect stage," Marcus replied. "He walked right into the trap you set for him and made it his own." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and opened it. "Every clause is standard. Nothing is overtly malicious, but the way it's all put together, it's brilliant." He filed the lien not as a vengeful spouse, but as a secured party protecting his investment. "Every receipt, every dollar he put into this house, is itemized, time-stamped, and cross-referenced against your marital asset trust." Isabella leaned forward. "There's no loophole?" "Nope. No clause to dissolve the POA. It can only be undone by mutual consent, which I assume he won't give." She didn't have to answer. Marcus flipped another page. He even included a conflict clause. "If the house ever becomes the subject of litigation or divorce proceedings, the lien automatically triggers a liquidation event." Meaning if I try to challenge it, I could be forced to sell," she whispered. "And he gets paid first," Marcus confirmed. Isabella's eyes were fixed on the granite countertop she had chosen, the backsplash she had ordered redone twice because the grout lines weren't perfect. Marcus slid the folder across the table toward her. "You should read it, but I already know what it says." She didn't touch it. After a moment, he added, "You know what else I found?" He didn't backdate a single thing. He did it all by the book. Every page filed, every dollar traced. He didn't trap you, Isabella. You gave him the lock. You handed him the key. And then you laughed while he turned it. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. David stood up. "I can't defend you from a move you initiated." "That's not what I meant to do," she said softly. He gave her a long, pitying look. "It doesn't matter what you meant. The record only shows what you did." And with that, he walked out. Isabella stayed seated long after the front door clicked shut. The file sat on the table, waiting. She didn't need to open it. The house echoed in ways it never had before, with a deep, judgmental silence that felt like it was coming from the walls themselves. It was almost midnight. Isabella was walking barefoot on the polished hardwood floors, a wine glass in one hand, her dead phone in the other. There were no new missed calls, no unread texts, just a black screen that reflected her own tired face. She passed the sitting room, where the imported Italian velvet chaise lounge sat unused, gathering a thin layer of dust. She used to host parties here, for guests who praised her decor and admired her home. Now, those same guests no longer returned her calls. One had even removed her from a group chat with a vague, We're just keeping things small these days. Next was the library. Not Arthur's vision of a library with worn leather and dark wood, but her version, sleek, minimalist, and sterile. The books were arranged by color. She'd chosen titles that looked impressive on camera. Now, a book called Empowerment for the Modern Marriage seemed to mock her from the shelf. The kitchen was all stainless steel and marble. The wine fridge that once held imported whites now contained a single bottle of cheap Riesling and 2 old energy drinks left by a friend who had ghosted her after the Leon went public. Her eyes drifted to the smart home control panel on the wall. Temperature, lights, security. Arthur had set it all up. She had rolled her eyes at the time. Now, the system still bore his username. Every notification, every motion alert, was a reminder. She didn't know how to change it. Upstairs, the bedroom felt cold. The closet was still full of clothes bought with the confidence of someone who never expected to be challenged. Cocktail dresses, statement jackets, designer heels. They all looked like costumes for a character she no longer played. She opened her nightstand drawer and pulled out the framed wedding photo she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Arthur stood beside her, his smile quiet and unreadable. She looked radiant, victorious. She stared at his face and whispered to the empty room, "Why didn't you just say something?" But she knew the answer. He never argued. He never raised his voice. He just listened, stepped back, and let her perform. And then, when it mattered most, he acted. Her office was next. She hadn't worked in there since the calls stopped coming. Her clients had vanished. She sat at the desk and tapped the keyboard. The screen blinked on, still logged into the county registry website, the very site that had dismantled her image. Leon, active, POA, active, disputes, none. He was everywhere in every file, every setting, every line of code she no longer understood. The house, once her trophy, now felt like a tomb for the identity she had tried to build. Even her father had gone silent. Her mother texted once, a vague thinking of you, followed by a string of photos from a charity dinner they hadn't invited her to. She hadn't just been excluded, she'd been erased. Claire walked the halls one more time. The motion sensor lights in the bathroom flickered on Arthur's idea. They now felt like they were tracking an intruder in her own home. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Red eyes, no makeup. She was still beautiful, but it was the kind of beauty that had once demanded control and was now left with none. Downstairs, she sat on the staircase, resting her forehead against the cool wood of the banister. This house, the one she bragged about, posed in and claimed as her domain, wasn't really hers anymore. It was a monument to his signature, his structure, his strategy, his silence. And in that silence, she was now completely alone. The morning was unnervingly still. No breeze, no birds, just a thick, breathless quiet. Isabella stood at the kitchen sink, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee. Her sleepless eyes drifted to the window, and that's when she saw it. One of the flat river slate stones lining the garden path, the one that was always slightly crooked, had something tucked under it. She stepped outside, the cold, dewy grass shocking her bare feet. The morning light illuminated a white envelope, stark and surgical against the gray stone. No name, no address, just deliberately placed. She crouched, her heart beginning to pound. Lifting the stone took more effort than she expected. She slid the envelope out and stood up. Inside, the paper was folded once. It was the same heavyweight, glitter-edged paper she had used for her list. Her rules. She unfolded it with trembling hands. There they were, her 12 bullet points floating on the pristine page. No signature, no acknowledgement, just her demands hanging in empty white space. Beneath it was a second page, on thicker, legal stock. She hesitated, then pulled it out. It was a copy of the power of attorney, the same one Marcus had shown her, the one filed with the county, the one she could never undo. Attached to the bottom was a yellow sticky note. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and unmistakably Arthur's. It was a single sentence. "You wanted rules. These are mine. They don't expire." Her breath caught in her throat. The papers slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the grass. She stared down at them, then back at the stone where they had been hidden. She wanted to scream, to rip them to shreds, but she couldn't move. She finally understood. He hadn't left the papers there as a threat or to gloat. It was a marker, a headstone for the version of herself who thought she had already won. He hadn't fought her with noise or spectacle. He hadn't dragged her name through the mud. He had waited, watched her performance, and when the moment came, he had signed something real, something permanent. Isabella staggered back inside, the empty envelope still in her hand. She looked around the house, really looked at it, for the first time in weeks. Every corner was a reminder not just of him, but of what she had tried to turn him into, a silent partner, a compliant investor in her grand reinvention. But he hadn't been silent at all. He had spoken in legal filings, in contracts, in clauses. While she was posting on social media about boundaries, he was building them. Real ones. Enforceable ones. Lines made not of ink, but of ironclad leverage. She collapsed onto the bottom stair, gripping the banister with white knuckles. And for the first time, not when her card was declined, not when the lien notice arrived, not even when her car was towed away, she began to cry. The truth had finally arrived, cold and absolute. The house was hers in name only. The power, the rules, the permanence, all of it belonged to him. And he didn't even have to live there to prove it.